Welcome, welcome to Anchored and Devoted by Pastors Jeremy and Joseph. We are children of God. Glad you're here. And we're talking about all the stuff you should know about as a believer in Christ when it comes to the real life.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure right there on us and them.
I'm just making it real. Like that's the goal. This isn't seminary. You might fall asleep. My bad, that's just out there. But the goal is to wrestle with, how do we live out our faith and how are we going to be ready for when Christ returns?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I know you wanted to get us going on the topic today.
Yeah, I wanted you and I to talk. The kind of conversation that we have had for the many years we've known each other. The question that came out of one of our conversations earlier that we recorded, we pushed off till today to answer. But the question is basically, what are some of the things that have shaped you into the person you are? You mentioned that when you were talking about when you gave your life to Christ, you talked about how your life was a mess. Your family life was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
There are other things you could talk about. Obviously, there are things that have had a major impact on shaping us, things we've walked through,
Mm-hmm.
things that we have suffered through, experiences that have elated us.
Mm-hmm.
But for all of us, there are key moments that I think God uses differently for each of us, but to shape us into the people that we are today, for good or bad, and we'll continue to as we move forward. So I kick it off to you. What are some of the seminal moments or seminal experiences in your life that have made Pastor Dave into the man that I hold in tremendously high regard? I won't even joke about that. I think very highly of you. Tremendous amount of respect for you.
Oh.
You know that. I can say it publicly. He's getting pink.
Shut up. Those of you who don't know, I'm no shade near the pink. As he red. Things that are moments where they're life changing. I'd say one change was college was huge for me. And I'll just back up a little bit. In high school, I started playing college. Started playing football later in life, and got recruited during basketball season, and ended up signing to go to the Naval Academy and went there. It was, I enjoyed it as much as you enjoy the Naval Academy. And at the same time, it wasn't, the best experience in my life, but it is something that grew me a lot. It was very much forming, and as many things in our journeys are, the tougher seasons are often ones where we grow the most. And so I grew a lot there. I learned a lot as well about people and relationships. And my expectations for long-term, deep relationships was completely blown out of the water, even though we had been through a lot of tough stuff together. And so that taught me a lot about what connects believers, because some of my closest friends at the academy were believers. And I hate to be this way, but I am the real ones. The ones that didn't have to be pushed out of bed because they were clubbing on Saturday or Friday night through Saturday into the, choir loft for Sunday. They were the ones who faded away, but the ones who were often odd ducks and just love God. The peculiar people, those are the ones that was able to stay close with and deal with the season change of leaving the academy, because I didn't want to leave. I planned on graduating. But God made it abundantly clear through the commandant that now was time to go. Those heart-jarring, head-hurting, soul-shaking moments where you don't know anything but where the sun is in the solar system
Mm.
are ones that cause you to look at God, to truly look at the sun, is Jesus, and recognize that none of this other stuff matters, that only the eternal stuff matters. And it made it so that my faith grew stronger because I could just trust God. You're going to find me another school. You're going to find an opening. I got denied from Maryland, which made my head spin, leaving the academy with a very high GPA. And I was released on a medical discharge, honorable discharge. Hadn't done anything dumb. A food allergy, but the Navy didn't know that at the time, and neither did I. And the journey of going to Maryland was one where it took 4 no's before I got the yes, and the yes came by a guy who had a wife who had migraines, and that's what I was suffering from. And so he could stamp the paperwork yes and help me figure out the path. And he was a believer, and that's the only time we know each other. And at the same time, I get to look forward to seeing him in heaven and knowing this brother that I met, who looked nothing like me, sounded nothing like me, but was able to connect on a heart level through Christ as well as through the sufferings of his wife. Just helped me understand again, God has a path. God has a place. I don't need to worry about even all the energies that I put into the 4 years prior to graduation. I don't need to worry about that. God has it. What I see as a loss, he's going to use. And that moment taught me a lot as far as friendship, to really value the ones that I have and to hold on to them even when people don't call you as often as they should or write you or do the things you'd expect from them. You make them your friend. To the point where, and you were there at my wedding, one of my friends from the Naval Academy even said, it was like, Dave's my friend because he's made himself my friend. It isn't as though he had done anything. It was just my decision. So I chose to love him just as I choose to love you. And I think that's something that as believers in Christ, we have to do with one another, is choose to love. And so that really, I'll use a Christian curse word. I got crapped on pretty good there. But it was one of those things where God did make some beautiful roses out of it. And I can look back and say, okay, yeah, I would not recommend that or want it for anyone. But God knows and did know what he was doing much better than I did. It took a long time to get past the hurt too, but it's one of those things where, again, the hurt of thinking I've got a family and in the Navy from my classmates, and then to just see that wasn't true, that my family really was in Christ. And that was what stood up. And that was whether they were in the Navy or not, or whether they were in the church or not, those were the ones, the real believers were the ones who were able to hold me up and wipe my tears and keep me going and push me on and, ask me questions about trusting God and not bludgeon me with God's Bible and God's word, but love me with it and help me to get up quickly and shake off the dust and keep moving. So that was a huge moment in my life.
How long did it take you to get over that pain? Well, how long was that journey for you?
As far as the weeping and gnashing of teeth, that was probably a good 3 months. I had my Joe moment where I was ready to do some negative things and act in ways that were not appropriate of a child of God, and so it was probably in those 3 months. And then that began to look and reflect on the things that God had brought me through in my childhood and even getting me to the Naval Academy and other stuff, so I could kind of release the moment to God, not just running away or dropping it, but hand it off and hand myself off.
So I want you to talk about that a little bit more. You were let out of the Navy on a medical discharge, an honorable discharge, but it shook you to a place where you had to evaluate who you were on the whole. I mean, most people, when they experience something that's clearly not their fault, not of their making. It's not that most of us aren't going to look at our lives and say, well, this is clearly not my fault, so let me do some self-examination. Let me go through some deep searching. But that was a part of your journey where you just said it caused you to look back and to evaluate things that happened through your child, from as far back as your childhood through to the present. Why was that, do you think, and what was that experience like for you?
Well, I know that God was humbling me. I would not say I was a prideful person by any means, but I know it was a humbling season because I did have in my mind and in my heart the plan for the future. This was January of graduating year. This wasn't my sophomore year or freshman year, even my junior year. This is months before graduation. Like this is the tail end. I've got 3 or 4 classes left. And,
had you already chosen a billet?
We had not. That was the next thing that was to come in January. And as we came back from leave, from Christmas leave and stuff. And this wasn't expected, even though I knew I had been taken up for medical before, but it was done through the academic channel, and that didn't work because my academics were fine.
Right.
But I just didn't believe that what was taking place would affect me before I graduated, even though I knew there were some things we had to work through as far as health. I just didn't think that my doctor had promised me he wouldn't retire. Like my identity was in people and what they were telling me as far as the process. And that meant I was looking 4 years out because I'm looking at serving for the next 4 years in this capacity and looking where I'm going to live and life and dreaming. And there's a lot of things attached to it. Stuff I really hadn't even thought of until it was taken away.
I love that you just said your identity was in other people. And essentially what you're now describing is that in order to change that, God essentially kicked that stool completely out from under you.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, yes. From, wearing the uniform to how you were viewed by others to, again, putting my trust in what the doctors are telling me and other people as opposed to, it being in God and to really, truly being in my identity in Christ.
So I want to ask you a kind of reflective question here. Having gone through that now, looking back in retrospectively, how did that change the way that you were able to trust people? Your identity was you had probably too much trust in people back then and not enough trust in God. So now you have more trust in God. But how did it change the way that you trust in people, good or bad?
I still trust people. I still trust them, but not with my future, not with my purpose. I trust people with what God has called them to do. I trust people with His words, and they are to live out the actions they've been called to do. But I'm not expecting them to encourage me, support me, even believe in the dream if that is something that God is going to do, because He can do it. I became a missionary right after that. It wasn't too long. I became a banker and then realized I could do better for God in my life than be a banker. Nothing wrong with bankers. I'm bashing everybody, professors, bankers. These are all jobs I've had, so it's fine. And it was a good job. It was just one of those things where I wanted to give the biggest bang for the buck on my life because I knew Christ had died for me. And that was a change from when I was at the academy, a huge change. So,
do you find yourself more or less isolated from other people now as a result of looking to God for these things that are, crucial to your future?
No, I find that actually I'm able to relate better, that I'm able to relax because I'm not looking for someone who is in a bad place to love me or to do something for me when I can love them because I've got the giver, the creator, the institution of love found in God. So
Yeah.
At least for me, it's made it so that I'm free, and I'm not defined or stuck with someone else's whatever. It really is more, God, what are you doing moment by moment? And then, as you choose, give me the vision for longer term stuff so that I can move with you. But even when it comes to investing stocks, I pray and tell my wife every day, I was like, hey, I made an order, but this is one of those things where I did my due diligence as far as the research, the man side, right? I was like, but I can't put my trust in that. God can do whatever he wants. If he wants to start a world war tomorrow, it's not going to do anything for us. And on the flip side, if he wants to return tomorrow, again, still, we going to heaven. Like, the investment time is one where I'm trusting God. It's not, I've got it, I own it, I know it. No, it's, my identity is fully wrapped in him, to the point of I can now engage with others without having to worry about me.
I didn't meet you until after that experience in your life. I met you 3 years after that or so.
Yeah, in seminary.
Yeah. And my experience of you is that you've always had the heart of an older brother towards the people around you. It doesn't matter whether or not you were actually older than them. Your heart was always one of protection, of assistance, of care and guidance. But as I've known you over the past, however many years it's been now, 15 years, I have seen you respond to a series of life experiences that have been challenging and very, very different one from the other. And with each one, I've watched as that particular part of who you are, your personality, that is an older brother towards people. I've watched that continue to be strengthened and deepened. And not that it was weak when I met you. When I met you, it was still very strong. In fact, we are friends today because of what you said. Your Naval Academy friend said at your wedding. I clearly remember the day that I remember meeting you. We were having lunch. I was in the cafeteria at the seminary, and you invited me to sit down at your table. And believing that I didn't know you, I do what I always do. I introduced myself and asked your name. And you said to me, I'm Dave. We're friends. Sit down. I said, good enough for me. and to be fair, we had a class the previous semester and had sat next to each other cutting up. And in my obliviousness, I had missed a semester of opportunity to know you more deeply. You had not. You were watching out for a blind fool. And my guess, though, going back to what you've been talking about, is that as you have shifted your foundation, the foundation of trust, from the people around you who can make promises, keep their word, to a God who never fails. My assumption is that part of you that is a big brother has also been strengthened through this, that you would not be able to be the older brother, in the older brother role that you are to many people, in the way that you are, to the effectiveness that you are today, if you had in fact graduated from the academy and gone on to, I'm assuming you'd probably be serving in a submarine.
Yeah. He's got jokes. First you tell him turning pink, and now you're making me small.
Dave is 6'6". I don't think they make submarines with that in mind.
Oh, mercy. What about yourself? How would you? What would you say is one of the moments in your life where you can say, okay, this was a change where God clearly did something, even I might not have seen it at the moment, might not understood it, but definitely. God was doing this thing. He was making me more into his image.
So it's been most of my life. So real quick bio. I have a genetic condition that cost me the vision in my right eye when I was 11, and has been taking the vision from my left eye since the time I was 7. After I lost the vision in my right eye, like I talked about it in the previous episode, I would go and I would ask for prayer for healing for a number of years, from the time I was 11 to probably the time I was 16 or so. The key moment, though, in all of this, at that time, was when I clearly heard God say to me in answer to, "God, will you heal me?" He said to me, "No, I won't." And I said, "Well, that's a really clear answer. Can you give me a reason? Will you give me a reason?" And he said, "Yeah, I will. Because I took away your blindness for your good so that you can see me more clearly. And I'm not going to give you back your vision until you're in heaven." And I wrestled with that for a little while, because it's not the answer I expected. It's not the answer I had. I knew it was a possibility, but I didn't actually think that God would say no. I thought maybe he'd, give a soft no, or a yes but not yet, or something like that, and it wasn't. It was a very clear no. I have taken this from you. This isn't about genetics. This isn't about physicality or biology. This is about me working in your life as a sovereign God, as your Father, to express to you, to demonstrate to you my love and my goodness through this pain that I'm bringing about in your life.
That's great, but how do you handle the no? Like, that's still a no. I don't want to hear that when they're praying. You're praying for healing. You want healing.
Yeah, it's a really good question, right? I heard it from a father who I knew loved me. I knew, even as he said it, I knew that no was the only most loving answer that was possible. If there were a more loving possibility, I would have received that other possibility. And maybe this sounds too fatalistic for some people, but the foundation of my faith is that God doesn't change. His love is beyond understanding. It's beyond description, beyond definition. I can look around at the world he's created and see the expanse and the extent of his creativity, his power. It's not for lack of ability that God hasn't healed me. It's not lack of love, because he already gave up his son for me. So if it's not lack of possibility, it's not lack of power, and it's not lack of love, then it must be for a positive reason. And what he's told me is that he's called me to a purpose, and he's working that purpose in me. And going back to talking about suffering, most often he's doing that through suffering. He didn't tell Moses, "Yeah, I'll take your stammer away." He didn't tell Paul, "Yes, I'll take that thorn out of your side." He says, "My grace is sufficient." And that's what he said to me. And even as he said it, what I felt was a very warm and loving embrace as he said it. And, the immediate application to me, I stopped going up for prayer. I mean, I did. And it wasn't because I didn't trust God. If anything, I trusted God more. I would have people come up to me and want to pray, and they'd say, "Hey, I'd like to pray." They'd know that I had vision loss. They'd want to come and stand with me. And I said, "Listen, I'll accept your prayer, but God's already told me he's not going to heal me. Pray for me if you wish. I'm not going to stop you, but I'm going to tell you, if you're asking me, you don't need to. This has already been answered. And there's not going to be a change. This isn't well, I didn't have enough faith, ask God again. This isn't a keep on knocking. This isn't a Luke 18 thing. This isn't you didn't knock hard enough, or you didn't knock loud enough or long enough. This is you knocked, God answered. I knocked, God answered. This is his answer. And it's good. Now, I don't want to belittle the years that happened between then and now, because the experiences that I walked through after that, turning 16 and realizing in a very embarrassing way that I was not going to be able to attain a driver's license. The reality that comes with not being able to have a driver's license, on what it means to be a friend to younger guys, or to date, or one day to marry, or to go to school. Experiencing the impact of continued vision loss, wondering if I'm ever going to see my wife or my kids, or if I'm going to lose my vision totally before that time. And then getting to certain parts of my life and realizing that there's so much that I feel very robbed of these experiences because of the vision that I've lost. Dave and I have talked about our running a little bit. Dave is a runner. I have become a runner. I'm still becoming a runner. It really is fantastic. I have a half-mile loop of a street that goes around my entire neighborhood with only one road in or out. That's the only place I can run without assistance. Because if number one, I've memorized where the potholes are and where the curbs are and where the speed bumps are and the landmarks marking where the speed bumps are, so I don't trip over them. The cars are always going fairly slow. People know me. I'm a big guy, so when you see me, it's pretty obvious there's something wrong with my eyes. But I can't just go out and take a jog on the street, one street over. It's not an option for me. I can't even sit in my front yard and watch my kids play across the street in the grass. I simply can't see them. Which means when I go to a playground or when I go to the beach, as a father, I am largely impotent to provide protection for my family. That is one that has been and continues to be really difficult for me to wrestle through. But the answer always comes back to what God originally told me. My grace is sufficient for you. I've done this so that you can see me and that you can know me in a way that you never would have been able to if you had all your limbs and all your toes and all your eyesight. And it goes again to this trust thing, which is why I think I picked up on it when you were talking about it. Whatever it is that we're trusting in, whatever it is that we are resting on for support, that is not God, He jealously looks at that to find a way to kick it out from under us so that we can fall into His hands and recognize that we are in His hands, and that's the best place we can be. Regardless of how nice or how opulent or how comfortable or how successful that other stool may have been, it is only a stool. And He invites us to come sit with Him, not on the stool. And He's going to do that for each of us. So for new believers, I want to encourage you, as someone who's walked down this road maybe a little bit longer than some others have, who might be listening to this, go to prayer for this. If there are things that you're looking at, go to prayer and ask God, would you show me things that I'm leaning on, that I'm trusting in, that you that maybe are a replacement for trusting in you, whether it's for my current provision or for my future or for relationships or for success or for health. Is there anything that I'm leaning on where I should be leaning on you? And if there is, would you grant me grace to give that up to you? And if possible, would you do it with not as much pain as could be, but as much pain as is necessary?
That's the kicker.
Yeah, it is. Not saying it's easy. Not saying it's easy.
And know that your relationship with Him is an eternal one. So even the stuff you're going through today, that you're working through, it can take seasons. It's okay. He is a patient God. He is a loving God. So just know He has forgiven you, and He will continue to forgive you as you are His. But on the flip side, if you aren't being corrected and things just seem to be perfect all the time, and
check yourself.
Yeah, that's a
check yourself.
That's a yellow/orange going to red flag. There are questions about whether he really is yours. It's not that there's anything wrong with having a good life or having the better things. That's not it. It's about your heart, and it's Jesus made it abundantly clear that it's easier for the camel to go through an eye of a needle than it is for those who are abundantly comfortable to make it into heaven. So just keep that in mind as you.
Yeah, absolutely. Without banging on anything contemporary here, I will underscore that and simply say that when Paul said, "I consider that the pains of this world today are not worthy of being compared to the riches of heaven," what he's saying there is, your good life is coming. You will have that good life that you desire, that you have a desire for right now. You will have it. It is coming. But it is yet future. And you're not going to receive that until you are finally home. And that's when it kicks in. Anything that we get here is gravy, but it's not the norm.
Mm-hmm.
The norm here is suffering. The norm here is struggle. The norm here is refinement by fire, by hammer, by tongs, so that the dross can be driven out of us, the gold may be revealed. Because that's what, that's what God is worthy of. And his goal in this section of our lives is to drive out that sin, to drive out that impurity, and to cause us to be conformed to the righteousness of Christ. And that'll be completed when we draw our last breath. And both of us are looking forward to that tremendously. We don't have any death wishes, but that's the good life that we're looking forward to. I am really looking forward to kicking back in paradise. I mean, a lot.
Yes.
A lot. Yeah. But that's the timing. And I do myself a disservice, and I deceive myself when I start looking for that today, expecting that's going to happen today. So, hopefully something there to encourage and direct.
There you go. That's it for today.
All right.